Propaganda. A society where more can be won by illusion than coercion. It's amazing considering how much it invades every aspect of our lives, how little there is written or spoken about propaganda. This video is just a wee taster for the subject. So let me lay out some ideas. What is propaganda? One description of propaganda is information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote a political cause or point of view. For instance, exactly what we're seeing on our TV screens day in, day out during this and every other election. Propaganda has a history going back to ancient Greece, to Aristotle's rhetoric, meaning the art of persuasion. It's now called public relations, PR, and is basically made up of bullshit in order to deceive, persuade and direct people towards voting for political parties whose main policies are designed to rob us blind. Today, one of its main uses is to sell us things or placate us into ideas that may not be in our best interest. Alec Carey wrote a book on propaganda called Taking the Risk Out of Democracy. The book eliminates how big business propaganda, waged by public relation experts, subverts democracy and ensures corporate dominance. In the book he states, it is arguable that the success of business propaganda in persuading us for so long that we are free from propaganda is one of the most significant propaganda achievements of the 20th century. Many believe propaganda doesn't affect them, but as we'll see, it's much more sophisticated than just selling us stuff. If you want an instruction manual about how propaganda works, look no further than the father of propaganda himself, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, Edward Bernays, and his book titled Propaganda. In it he described how propaganda works. It's not as crude as just selling things to people, but about changing lifestyles. If you look at a few of Bernays' successful projects, one was to encourage more women to smoke by tobacco companies. He did this by creating a parade in New York and inviting all these fashion models and glamorous women to walk down the street smoking cigarettes on cigarette holders and making it look fashionable, which led to a lot more women smoking in public and smoking in general, thus increasing the amount of people smoking cigarettes for the cigarette companies. Another was a commission from a piano maker to encourage more people to buy pianos, where he didn't even mention pianos by name. What he did was set up an idea of a lifestyle where cultured people would have a music room in their home, and of course the first thing you buy in your music room would be a piano. But he managed to increase the sale of pianos without even mentioning the word piano. It's not much different from a process we're persistently sold today. Look at the lifestyles around us. We all wear the same shoes, the same dresses, use the same phones. What we wear seems to define us or our group. From the poorest to the well-off, we buy into lifestyle choices constructed by public relations and marketing, not really by personal choice. So persistent and embedded in the public psyche are these ideas that we happily change how we look, feel and spend in the endless cycle of fashion fads, objects and lifestyles the market forces chose to drop on us, if we can afford them, while the poor can only crave them. Anyone going against these trends will be berated and vilified as old-fashioned, odd, behind the times and so on. Not even so much by market forces, but by those who buy into the constant changing lifestyle and accompanying accessories. These ideas prompted Marshall McLuhan to write these things. All media exists to invest their lives with artificial perceptions and arbitrary values. Far more thought and care goes into the composition of any prominent ad in a newspaper or magazine than go into the writing of their features and editorials. The business of the advertiser really is to see that we go about our business with some magic spell or tune or slogan throbbing quietly in the background of our minds, he said. But if propaganda was only used to sell us things, it mightn't be so harmful. But it has other devious uses: the management of public opinion and the pursuit of power by the rich. The following is taken from the above mentioned Taking the Risk Out of Democracy. Propaganda as a means of social control requires a number of conditions: the will to use it, the skills to produce propaganda, the means of dissemination, and the use of significant symbols. Symbols with real power over emotional reaction, ideally symbols of the sacred and satanic. To take these one at a time, the will to use propaganda can easily be explained by the profits amassed by corporations and bankers. So vast are the profits to be made by lying and deception, the rich will happily lie to their back teeth to maintain their position and disparity of wealth and power. The skills to produce propaganda. Public relations is a multi-billion-dollar industry and stretches around the globe. They produce nothing apart from advertising to sell what is not needed and to convince the public to buy into ideas that are against people's best interests. The means of dissemination, meaning how they spread propaganda. Well, that's easy. Corporate power owns the mainstream media, have control over the laws, have an army of groups and lobbyists continually pressurising and influencing government policy. The use of significant symbols. The expansion of the religious right into politics puts in place superstition as a viable component of decision making. God's will can thus be shaped into any contortion of truth or alternative truth to suit the elite fantasies. Arnold Toynbee, some years ago, writing for Chatham House, the home of the Government International Affairs think tank, puts it this way regarding symbols. For a local state may lose its sovereignty without losing those familiar features which endear it to the local patriot vernacular, language, folklore and monuments. So long as the local state is not stripped of these harmless trappings, it will remain almost as effective and idle as ever. Meaning we can keep our national monuments, flag-waving heroes, culture icons to distract us from the loss of our sovereignty and to distract us from where the real power lies, elsewhere. But the best example of propaganda in action is during an election. Turn on any mainstream network and it will ooze out the screen to meet you. No more so in the present debacle of what is known as representative democracy. If you only look at things like the BBC, where you kind of get lost in it, you really need to do a bit of digging in social media to find out what's really happening. One of the effects of living with electric information, McLuhan reminds us, is that we live habitually in a state of information overload. There's always more than you can cope with. Today we need to be more diligent about what we're taking in. People tend to vote for symbols and personalities rather than policies. This is a big problem and opens up to so much propaganda. Let's look for a minute at some symbols and what they represent. Take for instance the Mini motor car in the Labour Party. The Mini was a 1960s utilitarian vehicle. It was quite small, it was handy, it was quite cheap to run, it was quite cheap to produce, and was very popular during the 60s. We still have the Mini, but it bears no resemblance to the car that was first called the Mini in the 60s. It's a completely different design, it's a completely different concept, a different maker. Every part of the spec is completely different, but it's still called the Mini because the symbolism of the name is what's important rather than even the motor car. And the Labour Party today is not the same Labour Party that fought for the National Health Service and unionisation, fair wages for people and different things like that. It's a party that has capitulated to the right wing and has nothing to do or bears any relation to the Labour Party back then. But people still look at the symbolisation of what it is, and that's the way they choose to vote for things. And basically these things are just empty shells. They're meaningless apart from the symbolism of them. This is a crucial moment in understanding propaganda and the art of persuasion. At present, it is of vital importance to the Conservative government that they win the next election. And if they do, they will crucify us. One of the many ways they will do this is they will not transfer into law the laws that benefit ordinary people that were set up by the EU when they leave it. They will simply use the leaving of the EU to rewrite UK laws, and you can guarantee they will not replace them by better laws, but ones more accommodating to banks. Why? When David Cameron was Prime Minister, Nick Brown, a worker in the building, managed to sneak into a private meeting Cameron had organised, and she managed to put a question to him. It went, "Do you think the UK's current democracy, crippling voter apathy, is caused by the fact that its Prime Minister, Mayor of the capital and Chancellor were all in the same class at school, are all industrially dismantling the nation's assets and selling them off to their mates, are all related to banking families and have been proven over and over again to be singularly self-interested in every political decision?" Of course, the question was sidestepped by Cameron. Only Boris Johnson piped up that he went to the same school with Ed Miliband, the then resigned leader of the Labour Party, which proved the questioner's point that both ends of the so-called party political spectrum are represented by the same class of people, a class of people who know little and care even less about the lives of ordinary folk, and will use their power in office to maintain the political and economic disparity that they have enjoyed for centuries. Why should they want to do anything different? This election, people have a choice to make, and for working class people, it should be an easy one, given the evidence. But to discover the evidence, we need to look wider afield than the goggle box in the corner, or even the so-called qualities, or the red tops consumed by working class people as they travel to work each morning. Or as Malcolm X warned, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. But in the end, it doesn't matter which political party is in control. That's not the point. What is that people start to break down the bullshit and start to understand what we need to know.
The problem of fake news isn't solved by hoping for a referee, but rather because we as participants, we as citizens, we as users of these services help each other. We talk and we share and we point out what is fake. We point out what is true. The answer to bad speech is not censorship. The answer to bad speech is more speech. We have to exercise and spread the idea that critical thinking matters now more than ever, given the fact that lies seem to be getting very popular.
The message is here. Democracy is a conversation. To achieve it, we all need to participate and become part of it, or Edward Snowden's sacrifice, and the many like him, could be in vain.